Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Please Advise. This week, we are very lucky to talk to Adela Cardona of Beckett Simonon about all things made-to-order model, talking a little bit about conscious consumption and conscious consumerism, and how, being a responsible company is about more than just being accidentally responsible, being intentional. It's a fantastic episode. I am so excited to share it with you. So let's go ahead and dive in. Welcome, Adela. So great for you to join us. I'm so happy to have you here today. Would you mind introducing yourself to our listeners?
Thank you, Sam. It is so exciting to be here. Like you said, my name is Adela Cardona. I am from Colombia. I grew up in the Café region, and I studied initially journalism and literature, but I have always had this passion for fashion because my grandmother and my mother had always cared about how they looked, and I have inherited a lot of things from both of them. So I have this relationship with long-lasting clothes. And I started my career in fashion journalism, which is how I got to this concept of responsibility, of ownership, of the impact of our clothes. And that's how I ended up in Beckett Simonon coordinating responsibility.
Wow, that's incredible. And it's funny because I think until very recently, a lot of people didn't think about long-lasting clothes. It was all about what's in style right now, what can I wear today, fast fashion. And I feel like we're kind of at this precipice where we're beginning to fall into a much more responsible and ethical appreciation of fashion today. So it's amazing to hear that that's something that's always been top of mind for you since, you were young.
Yeah, and actually it's weird when you say that because at this point we are starting to, I feel, go back to the way it was. Because our grandparents, our parents used to buy things that they could love for a very long time that we forgot with the coming of fast fashion in the 90s. So in a way, we are kind of going back to roots.
Yeah, that's honestly such a great point. I never really thought about how the Industrial Revolution, I guess, applied to fast fashion much later. And this idea of us having things made quickly really impacted the consumption trends of it. That's definitely super interesting. But it sounds like, from what you've told me and what I've seen, that you kind of approach things a bit differently.
Yeah, we do. Beckett Simonon is a footwear and accessories brand that was founded by two best friends, two kids from Bogota. And they were punk kids when they were young, and this translated very well onto how afterwards with Beckett Simonon, they decided to turn retail in its head. They had a previous experience on how they worked on traditional retail with a different leather goods and accessories brand, and they realized that there was a lot of inventory that got wasted on the traditional retail route, which was terrible. And also there were a lot of markups. So if usually the bag would cost $10, it would end up costing you, the client, $40. Which is absurd because you would be paying for an inventory that you didn't even ask for. You didn't tell anyone that you wanted that dress or that bag. So they decided to go into a different business model that's called made to order, in order for them to be able to not have inventory and to also use the money that they didn't spend on markups to pay fairly the workers and the artisans that are behind their products.
Wow. Honestly, that's incredible. And I think so different than what we see a lot of companies do today. I mean, a great example is, everything that we've talked about in COVID. A lot of supply chains were kind of turned on their heads because either they had a ton of inventory that wasn't being purchased all of a sudden, or they just weren't agile enough to keep up with demand. The great toilet paper shortage of 2020. So it's definitely interesting to see this company that, has been around for a decade has really embraced that made to order model so ahead of the curve.
Thank you. And when you speak about this this way in which a lot of retailers found themselves in COVID with stock or inventory that they could not sell. Another issue was that they didn't even pay the people that had already made those orders. And we have been fortunate enough to be able to keep not only the whole HQ team, but all of the artisans, even the ones that were too old to come into the studios. We have been able to keep everyone on salary and pay for all of our orders, which is great because that's the way it should be. I mean,
yeah. I mean, we saw a lot of issues. I mean, I can remember tons of stories from last year about companies like Amazon and stuff like that, just not giving safe, ethical, fairly paid workplaces for the people that were really supporting the country at that point in time, because so much was being ordered from e-commerce, so many essential items. And then those workers were not being compensated fairly or put in safe conditions. So I would love to hear a little bit more about your artisan model and how you work with artisans for your made to order business model.
Thank you. So what we do is we work with 3 studios here in Bogota, Colombia, in a sort of neighborhood that's called El Restrepo. And this is a very traditional neighborhood where you will find people that have been doing shoemaking for decades, for 50, 30 years, 40 years. And what happened was that a lot of this expertise was getting lost because people, due to this fast fashion and consuming trends, did not want to pay the price for something that was so well made, you know?
Yeah.
And there were other options. So when we found these studios, it was the perfect equal partnership because they were looking for a market that was willing to appreciate the expertise, the quality that it took to make shoes that last and that look and feel this amazing. And we needed experts to be able to give our audience something that they could inherit their sons and their grandsons. And without the expertise of these artisans, that's not possible.
Right. Yeah. I love what you said about it being an equal partnership, right? Because I think many organizations don't necessarily bring that mindset into their initial negotiations or initial conversations with the people that work for them. And a lot of companies look at, consider it factory workers, and it's just a blind person, behind, I don't know, the background that we don't really think about or see. And it's amazing to kind of think about how you're really looking at it in a much different way.
Yeah, and that's why from the start of when we moved our manufacturing to Colombia, we made sure that every single artisan was under contract, had for wages, caregiver leave, vacations, everything that should just be the norm, No one should be surprised by this. But unfortunately, it's not a reality, not even looking at other countries, but even here, sometimes you find people that just don't treat other humans as human beings. And something that we do to ensure that people know their story is that we send our customers bi-weekly emails on where they get the backstage of how your shoe is being made, the lasting, the soling, the plague stitching. And also you get interviews with the artisans themselves, like YouTube interviews, where you will be able to see who made your shoe, who cut the leather, or the person who's in charge of making the soles. And even the assistants are important because, for example, there's this duo in our sneaker factory that's called, the shoemaker is called Miguel, and the assistant is Sophia. And Sophia is learning with Miguel how to do certain parts of building the sneakers. And then with that knowledge, she will be then able to learn even more and become an assembler herself. So this is a way in which we're also trying to ensure that this craft is not lost.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like a true lasting, relationship that you're building, not only with your consumers, but your artisans and the communities. It's more than just like a quick, contract. It's like a true relationship.
Yeah. it's a true relationship, and we want them to get the whole credit of the shoes that people receive, which is why we send these emails.
That's pretty amazing. And I think that there's been a lot of conversations lately about transparency in supply chains. And this kind of brings it to a whole new level. It's not just like, let me go get a blind certification where somebody says like, yep, here's a stamp, you did a good job, this location is certified. You're truly giving your consumers an inside look into how things are made and put together.
Yeah, we believe this is important because once you know who is behind your clothes and the process that went into making something, you have a better connection with that item, and that makes it that makes you have a longer connection with it, and makes it harder for you to then go and put it in a trash can, because you built a connection with that item even before it got to you, like waiting for a Christmas present.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I have a few items of clothing that were handmade, and I like don't ever want to get rid of it, because I know it was handmade and I know how much time and effort went into it, and it just does give you that. It's almost like an emotional connection to your clothes, as opposed to this fast fashion relationship that we, or I guess consumers, have kind of developed.
Yeah, completely. It's going against that like make, wear, and then toss kind of current. It's more develop a relationship with your clothes and make sure that those clothes that you're buying are also repairable and long lasting, because when things go into landfills or are incinerated, as we have seen, they produce a lot of CO2 and methane, which also contributes to climate change. So one beautiful thing is that the longer you keep your items in your closet, the better it is, not only for you and your pocket, but also for the environment.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because I've been looking a lot into the secondhand market lately, and a lot of, thoughts around that. And that could be a separate conversation.
Yeah,
but it definitely changes how you look at the items that you own and how you appreciate them. And it even brings in some of that, historical kind of mentality into it, where it's like, this is part of my wardrobe. This is part of who I am. This is an expression of myself, as opposed to this is just something hanging on a closet that I'm going to wear for a month, 2 months, 3 months, and then pass off.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because in order for something to be part of your wardrobe, it has to have a timeless style. And that's what we're looking for. Like the styles you see on our website is something that you could wear, that your grandpa could wear, that your son could wear. Because a lot of the issues are that we have been taught from some years over to now to follow trends instead of to listen to ourselves and develop an actual style. And that's what we want. We want you to have timeless style that you can wear forever and not worry about it.
Yeah, that's such a great thought, because half of fashion and half of the issues with fashion, or some percentage of it, is of course the companies and how they produce. But I think the second half of it too is this idea of conscious consumption and making sure that we're buying things that last and buying things that are not going to just be in style for a season. And it's interesting because I see a lot of sustainable companies who still have huge catalogs and release new things every week and have a ton of different items and still promote this fast fashion mentality, even if they're producing sustainably. And at the end of the day, those are, counterintuitive. You have to look at it from an intersectional lens.
Yeah, I believe that's one of the things that we are trying to tackle, and that's overproduction and overconsumption. That is kind of the elephant in the room for fashion. Because in a sense, you can have really incredibly well-made materials, but if you keep producing a lot, and if the consumer keeps having this mentality of I see it, I buy it, it's still going to be a lot of this stuff on earth
Right.
that we do not even need. And I know that the most responsible thing would be to not wear anything like at all and to not buy anything at all. But we're trying to ensure that because we're not going to go around without shoes, at least you
or naked.
or naked. At least you are the one who makes the decision on whether that is made or not. We don't even cut the leather before somebody says, I want this item.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think that probably has to be translated into your marketing efforts too, right? The idea of don't buy, but buy when you need it and buy quality, lasting goods.
Definitely. That's what we believe in. We believe long lasting is better for you as a person, but it's also very better for the earth. And it makes impulse buying a little bit less of a mentality for people. Because when you buy our products, you have to wait 8 to 10 weeks for it to get to you because this is something that's crafted by people and not just machines. And we only sell US, we're in Colombia, so it takes a little bit of time to get there. But it's important for people to know that it is worth the wait, that you're going to get a quality item that's going to last you for years. And this makes it possible for us to, in a certain way, educate the customer, to go back to those roots of desiring something and getting it finally for your birthday, something like that, to make sure that we go back to having longing for something and not just impulse buying it.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really interesting point. So a lot of companies are profitable because they sell a ton of stuff, right? They're constantly selling you a new pair of shoes, a new shirt, a new bag, etc. And that's how they maintain their relationship with you, is through purchasing. But the way that it sounds like you do it and Beckett Simonon does it is by building this long-lasting relationship with your consumers through various touch points, including those emails that you send out with transparency, and just your overall messaging is a little bit different and I think more conscious, correct me if I'm wrong, but more conscious of an approach than a traditional marketing approach.
Yeah, what we try is for people to basically be thoughtful of what they're buying. Because if you need something for next week, for example, we're not the company for you. So we want people to think before they buy. And that is sort of our approach. And there is something very important for us, and that is that we're not a sustainable company, because we don't believe any company can be 100% sustainable. Because even if you only make one thing, it has an impact. It has an overall impact. No matter whatever you do, you're going to have an impact. So for us, it's more about being thoughtful and being responsible of the impacts that we have and try to make them as positive as you can, both on our side as a company and on the side of consumers and audiences. It's basically what we do as human beings. Every action has a consequence. So we have to be responsible for our consequences, which is why we think of ourselves more as a responsible company than a sustainable company.
That's interesting. So it's almost like, yes, you're sustainable in the sense that you are making things to order. You're not having this massive amount of inventory. Your waste is, much lower than a typical company.
Yeah.
But it's also about being intentional with those practices and not just like, oh, wait, it just so happens that we're sustainable. Let me put the sustainable green sticker on. It's yes, we do have these responsible practices, but now we're also being intentional about it and going and thinking about, what else can we do? How else can we be responsible and be responsible stewards of the earth?
Definitely. And I love that you bring that up, because there is no way we or anyone can be perfect. And we believe that responsibility is a moving target. Like you never become, like you never get to a point where you don't have to do more.
Right.
And we're constantly searching for different ways to make our impacts better. So right now, for example, we are trying to figure out a way to bring more wellness to our artisans, maybe trainings or programs. And we're constantly searching for different ways to reduce waste into the factories, for example. So these are things that are ongoing. These are programs that we have that we haven't gotten to the point of implementation yet. But as a company, we're always thinking how to do better. And we're open for the consumer themselves to tell us when they think that we can do better somewhere. Because there is something very important in having the capacity to understand that other people can have an input and know better than you do. And so if anyone from our customers to other people in the industry have different ideas that we can enrich with to be better, I think that's what's important, because responsibility is not something that one company is going to solve. That's impossible. Mm-hmm. It is a job for companies, for governments, for consumers, for marketing people. So basically, that's where we are. We are constantly learning, wanting to do things better, and open to learning from everyone else too.
That's a great point, because collaboration is a hugely important element of sustainability and responsibility. And I think that a lot of companies are really hesitant to share what they're doing. Hesitant to get any backlash. You know, a lot of companies know that they're not perfect. And then as a result, they're like, I'm just going to keep things close to chest. I'm not going to share it because I don't want all of the negative backlash to happen. And, you know, your point about sustainability and responsibility being a moving target, I think is really important for organizations to remember when they're thinking about, you know, how can we start being responsible? It's not necessarily about where you are today. While yes, it would be great if we were all as close to perfect as possible, we recognize that that's probably not realistic, but it's about understanding where you are, setting goals and working towards them, and then setting new goals and working towards them, and then constantly trying to be intentional and improving.
Exactly. And I think that makes things less overwhelming, both as someone who works in responsibility and as a consumer. It makes things less overwhelming because there's no perfect way to be a conscious consumer either, you know?
Right.
So it just takes off the pressure.
Yeah. No, I love that thought, because it's, as a consumer, it's really, as soon as you start looking into sustainability, it's like a black hole spiral. And then there's all of this, like, how am I going to do this? Like, I have to cut out every single thing of my life. And unfortunately, that's just not feasible, right? It's not likely for most of us. And it's just like about constantly trying to be more responsible in all of our actions, whether it's business or personal.
Completely. That's what's about.
So one last question for you. You know, we talked a little bit about collaboration and we talked a lot about responsibility, but if you were a company, or if you were talking to a new company today who is like, this is super interesting to me, I really want to become more responsible, you know, what advice would you give them? What have you seen from your experiences that have been easy things for companies to start doing as they go down their responsibility journey?
Well, first of all, what we just spoke of, don't get overwhelmed. Responsibility is a very complex topic, and something that has been huge for us is to be able to concentrate on a couple of things that we care a lot about. So as you know, we care a lot about the artisans and the people. So we have focused a lot of our efforts in there. So what I would advise first and foremost is look at who you are as a brand. Look at who you are as a founder, and figure out what you care about and what the brand cares about. And then start looking about and around to realize what things you can do with that. Something that was very useful to us as well to be able to figure that out was to look at the sustainable development goals and see which goals we identified with. Like, what do we want to tackle at this big, insane issue that has to do with both social justice and environmental justice. So that would be the first thing that I would recommend. The second thing is to figure out a way to connect your customers with your story and what's behind what you do, because this is something that has done us like a huge favor, because a lot of what we spoke about is that when you don't have a connection with your items, you're more likely to just dispose of them. So create a better connection and be more transparent about what you are already doing. And the third one would be document what you do, which has been pretty hardcore for us, because we are trying to get certified as well. And when you're trying to get certified, or even when you're trying to communicate something on your social networks or on your website, you have to have documented those little steps that you have taken towards your goal. So like from small things, like we recycle in our office. Okay, but like how many tons have you recycled in your office? You know? So be very intentional about documenting the good practices you're doing, and also about looking at the things that you're not doing well and documenting those too, to be able to make them better.
Yeah. I mean, all of those are such great points. From a documentation standpoint, it's really hard to show that you're progressing without that documentation. So otherwise, it's just kind of like fluff. You're like, yeah, we started recycling.
Yeah.
Cool.
And but what are the outcomes, you know? And that's hard. This is something that we have struggled with. But we're on a journey to get there.
And I think what you said is a great point. Like, start that early. Make that a habit on day one of documenting and keeping track of that data, because then down the road, when you are trying to show your progress, you don't have to like go and try and back calculate and like think about how much do we recycle in a week? Let me try to multiply that, like, you know, times however long, and it just becomes a nightmare. So I think that's a great point. Especially around like documentation is so important, and especially when you start thinking about getting certified or going down the reporting route or anything like that.
Yeah, completely. And just to communicate with people what your impacts are about, it is very important.
Definitely. And then your first note too, or your first two, I suppose, around picking your poisons per se.
Yeah.
So for the opposite of poisons, picking your non-poisons. Yeah. You know, it's interesting because I talk to a lot of companies and they're like, yeah, we care about social justice. We care about environmentalism. We care about the water. We care about land. We care about animals. We care about everything. And I'm like, cool, me too. But we can't really have an impact on everything. So having that focus, like, it's not only does it make your life a little bit easier and make things a little bit less overwhelming and make it easier to communicate with your consumers, but your efforts go so much further by really focusing and honing in on, you know, one or two causes. It doesn't mean that you can't pay attention to any of the others. Doesn't mean that you can't be a good environmentally friendly company at the same time and have good ethics there. But when you're thinking about where to make a true impact, that focus, you know, allows you to amplify your efforts.
Definitely. It's completely like that. It does not mean that you cannot do little things like on the whole kind of virtuous cycle. It just means that you're going to make your efforts mean something. And that's also important because unless you are like a giant company, you don't have infinite resources, human or financial. So you have to focus your human and financial resources in a very smart way so that you're able to have the best impact, and just keep doing it and it will add up.
Yeah. And I mean, that's a great point. Like the resources element, right? Some companies forget that you have to be profitable in order to have an impact. Yeah. Like if you lose the profitability part, like you can't do anything. You have to be profitable. You have to be a good business and a you know, healthy business in order to have an impact. And it's not bad to be profitable, because that's the only way you can really make it work.
Yeah. And it's not just bad it is not only not bad to be profitable, But there have been lots of studies that have shown that responsibility and profitability are not opposites.
Yeah.
Like there are a lot of strategies in which being responsible means that you will do better. For example, I'm not sure what the stats are, but there has been a lot of talk around the fact that when your employees are happier, when they have meaningful ways of being together with each other as a team, and even when they are able to have a very good work-life balance, they're gonna be better for the company too. So even if you look at it from a very sort of cold, profitable standpoint, it's profitable. It ends up being good on the long run, but people are used to looking at it from like, what's going to happen now? How am I going to be profitable now? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's such a great point too. It's like future focused and business focused are the exact same thing. Like you have to be sustainable to be future focused. Otherwise there's a lot of risks, a lot of issues. I mean, we could talk about every single industry and never in this conversation. But it ends up being so related. And even now, especially as consumer demand is changing and behavior is changing too, like a lot of growth is happening for these companies that are being responsible because that's what consumers are looking for today.
Definitely. And let's just hope that this is a lasting change and that people can keep learning with us because we're learning at the same time how to live in a more thoughtful and fair way.
Yes, I love that. I love that. This has been such a great conversation and it's been so enlightening. And, you know, where can people find you? How can people follow you and follow Beckett Simonon on their sustainability and responsibility journey?
Thank you. You can look at us on Instagram at Beckett Simonon, same as the brand, and basically anywhere else. I know it is a little bit hard to write, so I hope that you put the link.
I'll tag it for us.
Thank you. And I go by Adela Fajuri on Instagram, and that's it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. This has been fantastic, and I look forward to talking to you more soon.
You too. Thank you so much. This has been an incredible conversation.